Hello there world, I'm the Talking Mausoleum and welcome to my top 5 sorcery spells for PvP in Elden Ring. Now there are 70 sorceries total in Elden Ring, so I decided to narrow it down a bit by focusing only on offensive spells that can deal damage for this list. So you won't see no Scholar's Armament, Eternal Darkness and the like on this one. The way I went about coming up with this list is by making 3 builds, all slightly differing in how much intelligence and dex they have, to see how damage and casting speed factor into the usability of any spell. And then I just went ahead and did a ton of duels, sometimes only using a single spell as my damage source, sometimes a combination of different spells. I also had a melee weapon at the ready too, but tried not to rely on it as much as possible. Even though we're only looking at duels in the footage, we'll talk about the spell's usability in invasions as well. It's just much easier to see the spells at work in a duel setting. Also, I am usually not much of a spell user in PvP, so please forgive me for playing less than optimally here. I've got some honorable mentions too before we get into the list proper. For one, there are the night sorceries like Ambush Shard that stand out for not being parryable. There is Carrion Glintblade for being a great supplementary spell in addition to almost anything else you're using, and then the Swift Glintstone Shard for its quick casting speed, helping you to easily finish off someone who's low on health. Any particular spell not being on this list certainly doesn't mean it's not good, just that I felt there were better options that either were more versatile, more damaging, or just easier to spam and get lucky with. I'd also love to hear from you what your personal top 5 would be down in the comments. So let's get right into it, but first a huge shout out to all my new subscribers. We actually cracked the 500 sub mark recently, thanks to all of you, and I really appreciate all your support. Also, stick around to the end of this list for a surprise plot twist of sorts. Anyway, let's start off with number 5. Number 5. The number 5 spot was definitely the hardest to fill here, since there were just so many options to choose from. But in the end I decided to go with a personal favorite of mine, Adula's Moonblade. A cold sorcery costing 26 FP to cast that requires 32 intelligence and fills up 1 spell slot. The game actually considers this spell to be both a cold sorcery as well as a Carrion Sword sorcery, so you can buff it with the Carrion Glintstone Staff as well as the headpiece of Ranni's outfit. Adula's Moonblade conjures up a magical blade that does a horizontal slash and also fires a projectile with both a wide AoE and also some decent range. You can't charge the Moonblade, but you can string multiple casts together for slightly quicker casting time on the follow-up. And of course, as a cold sorcery, Adula's Moonblade also builds up frost on your opponent as an additional source of pressure. The initial cast is a little bit slow, especially without Radagon's icon or anything, and the 26 FP are actually a pretty significant cost, but Adula's Moonblade more than makes up for that with its excellent damage. Even with just the projectile, you'll often take away a quarter of your opponent's health bar, and 2 hits should usually be enough to proc frost on your opponent for another burst of damage. Since the second cast comes out more quickly if you chain multiple Moonblades together, you can sometimes catch your opponent with the second hit when they roll through the first one. In invasions, the large area of the spell's blade as well as projectile part makes it great at crowd control, since you're able to hit multiple opponents at once with it. In my testing, I didn't find a higher casting speed to be overly relevant to how well this spell performs, since it's on the slower side anyway, but you definitely have to get used to the timings. Therefore, Adula's Moonblade is best used in conjunction with other spells or weapons whose attack come out a little faster. Number 4. Collapsing Stars belongs to the Gravity family of spells, costs 18 FP to cast and requires 36 intelligence. As a gravity sorcery, its damage can be buffed with the Meteorite Staff. The spell fires 9 orbs of magic that travel quickly and home in on your opponent. It's basically a buffed version of Gravity Well, which only fires 1 orb but has the same casting speed. The biggest draw, at least for me, for this spell is its ability to pull your opponents closer to you when it connects, making them susceptible to a follow-up attack. This can work especially well in invasions when an opponent tries to run away from you and doesn't watch out for what's behind him. With 18 FP it has a very reasonable cost, since even with just 10 mind we can cast it 4 times in a row without refilling. And if you manage to actually connect all 9 orbs, it has some alright damage as well, although that's not the main draw of this spell as we talked about. It certainly doesn't have the fastest of casting speeds, but is just fast enough so you can easily spam it to force your opponent to roll through the orbs, which they will often do in your direction, where you then can follow up with a different, faster spell or attack to catch them at the end of their roll. When using the collapsing stars exclusively, they quickly get kinda predictable, so again you'll want to mix it up a little to mess with your opponent's timings. You can charge the spell to delay its timing a bit between casts, so definitely play around with that as well, but your opponent will usually reaction roll the projectiles in a duel, so this may be more useful in invasions when there's other stuff going on to divide their attention. And also be cautious to not spam the collapsing stars when your opponent is rather close to you, because due to the trajectory the individual orbs take, they can't easily hit targets under a certain range. Number 3. Star Shower. The new Stars of Ruin basically. Costs 23 FP, requires 24 intelligence and once more takes up 1 spell slot. There are 3 spells with comparable properties that we can look at for this entry. Glintstone Stars, Star Shower itself and then Stars of Ruin. Before it got nerfed in patch 1.06, Stars of Ruin was very clearly the best choice as far as magic homing missiles go, thanks to its excellent tracking and high damage. But now after the nerf, your opponent actually has a very good chance to avoid the spell completely by just running left or right. Glintstone Stars on the other hand is basically just a weaker early game version of Star Shower that fires 3 instead of 6 individual magic projectiles. It also only costs 14 instead of 23 FP, but with only 3 projectiles its damage potential is also much more limited. Since the tracking on both Glintstone Stars as well as Star Shower has remained untouched by nerfs, unlike Stars of Ruin, Star Shower is the new best option out of these 3 in my opinion, to make your opponent roll around wildly trying to avoid all the magic coming their way. If you just spam the spell against an opponent who is too far away to punish you, it's very unlikely that he will completely avoid all damage, which makes it a great tool for chipping away at their health. Here, having more decks, or virtual decks from the Redigan's Icon for example, for quicker casting can be quite beneficial to really overwhelm your opponent with a barrage of projectiles. But either way, you should definitely also carry a tool to deal with anyone who tries to get close to you, since Star Shower won't help you much there. But other than that, just fire away at your heart's content and watch your opponent's health bar dwindle. In invasions, Star Shower is especially well used in situations where you have the terrain on your side and your opponent can easily get to you or retaliate with a ranged option of their own. Number 2. For our number 2 entry we can once more look at 3 similar spells here. Glintblade Phalanx, Carrion Phalanx and Greatblade Phalanx. Glintblade Phalanx conjures 5 floating swords and costs 20 FP, while Carrion Phalanx gives you 9 swords for 26 FP. So definitely the better sword to FP ratio here. Greatblade Phalanx only gives you 3 swords at 35 FP, so initially you could assume it's the worst one, but those swords are also bigger and deal a lot more damage. In terms of casting speed however, the Greatblade Phalanx is a lot slower to get off than the Carrion and Glintblade versions, which makes it much harder to cast during battle when you have to contend with an aggressive opponent. The Greatblade projectiles themselves also travel slower when fired, which might sometimes catch an opponent off guard, but overall the Carrion Phalanx is just much easier to connect with, which is why it takes the number 2 spot. Since the projectiles of these spells only fire once you face your opponent and they're in a certain range, you can set up some devastating combos by casting the Phalanx first, turning away from your opponent, and then quickly turn around by locking on, casting a different spell and have the Phalanx fire simultaneously. It's very unlikely that your opponent will be able to avoid all those projectiles coming their way. And in general, just having these blades hover around you ready to fire while you start an attack with your weapon, that's a pretty anxiety-inducing situation for your opponent to be in. Since they always have to be ready to roll away from the swords, you can really mess with their game plan here, especially if your opponent tends to be overly aggressive. And in invasions, where you'll usually face multiple opponents who will give you little time to react, this spell is also perfectly suited to be used before you engage to keep at least one of them off your back for a second or utilize its combo potential for a quick kill. Carrion Phalanx is definitely more of a supplementary spell to be used in combination with other spells or weapons since you don't have full control over it. But in this role it is incredibly powerful. Using the lock on to your advantage and getting the timings down definitely requires some practice, especially if you're not used to fighting while unlocked, but once you've got that down you'll probably don't wanna go without it ever again. So even though the Carrion Phalanx alone probably won't carry you through a fight, it's well deserving of being this high on this list. Number 1. And in first place we have the Carrion Slicer. Carrion Slicer is a short-ranged but very fast magic sword attack that only costs 4 FP per cast and requires a measly 14 intelligence to use. So very cheap and very low requirement, allowing you to use it on all kinds of builds. The sword swings come out about as quick as a swing of a regular straight sword would if you don't have high dex to boost your casting speed. But to use Carrion Slicer to its full potential, I would definitely recommend going higher in dexterity and or using Radagon's Icon to increase casting speed, since then you'll be able to get quick hits in against almost any weapon. You can either string the regular attacks together or use its rolling or running attack that have essentially the same move but with a slightly faster startup. Of course, since this is a melee spell, it doesn't really have any range at all, but in terms of damage to FP cost ratio, this is probably the best spell in the entire game if you set up your build accordingly. You don't get any noticeable hyper armor from the attack itself, but if you have enough poise to tank at least a hit from a lighter weapon, a single 4-hit slicer combo can be enough to finish off an opponent who tries to trade with you. And since it's so cheap, this is one of the few spells where using Lusat's Staff for additional damage boosting at the cost of 50% more FP might actually be worth considering. You can definitely win battles only using the Slicer, but once more the true power of being a spellcaster is unlocked by cleverly combining different spells. And this is where the plot twist I mentioned in the beginning comes into play. See, while I certainly feel like this list gives a good overview of the best offensive sorcery options in Elden Ring, watching me duel with only one of them at a time might have already given you the feeling that there's more that we could do. So while all these spells have their own benefits and shortcomings, the best way to work around those is of course to memorize multiple different spells that work well together and give you a good option for a variety of situations. Just combining our top 5 spells here into a single build already gives us an incredibly powerful moveset, where we can for example surround ourselves with a Phalanx, then cast Star Shower while turning towards our opponent to make it very difficult for them to dodge all our projectiles, and then follow that up with a Moonblade or a Collapsing Stars to draw our opponents close to us, where we can then switch to the Slicer to finish them off. You can of course pick and choose the spells you like most and combine them with all kinds of other spells for various cool combos, but I would be very surprised if not at least one of the 5 spells mentioned on this list would find its way into your final loadout. So if you have a caster build, what spells do you prefer to use? What other spells should have been on this list in your opinion? And also, would you like me to do a similar video on incantations as well? Let me know in the comments and like and subscribe if you want to help grow my channel. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, have a wonderful day and see you very soon!